And we are back. You are listening to Within Tolerance Book Club, episode 2 of Critical Chain. I'm Dylan Jackson of Protein Machining,
Chris Zapatini of Zapatini Consulting.
and we are going to talk about, 13 through 25 this time?
Yes. Yeah.
So before we jump into that, though, for anybody following along on the Within Tolerance Instagram through the stories, Chris just went through a epic road trip. So why don't you fill us in on the total mileage and, the highlights of the trip?
Uh, Total mileage was like just under 8,200 miles. It took it took a couple days longer than I expected because my car gave up in Memphis at like 8 a.m. on Saturday morning after Thanksgiving.
Of course.
And so I gave up the car and I bought another car. So that was pretty cool. And then that car just broke down too.
Oh my
um,
god.
but the highlights, I basically went north to south twice. Yeah, from Boise to Phoenix. I didn't see anybody in Phoenix. That was quicker than I was expecting it to be. And then went out to LA, saw Jamie Underwood, and just like kind of I worked out of Hadrian for like a day, essentially. Not like for them, just at the place.
Right.
While they were doing a like a Thanksgiving like barbecue thing or whatever. So that was pretty cool. Um, Saw some buddies. Uh, and then saw Kevin, who's going to be on the podcast soon. He just hit me up, and I didn't realize that he worked at KibTech until I was like there. He's like, "Hey, just come check out the shop," and I was like, "Oh yeah, sure." And then I'm like, "There," I'm like, this like I see KibTech everywhere. Like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
And it dawned on me. I'm like, oh yeah, like look at these sick chassis, like gorgeous welds. Like, oh yeah, duh, obviously. Um, and then drove up to the Bay Area. Stayed the night there, or was it? No, I still think I stayed like a couple days there. Um, just like worked for Monster Hook for a little bit there. Missed Melissa. She took a nap and fell asleep. And then I drove from the Bay Area to see Easton, which was the longest like stretch without stopping. It was like 31 hours of driving or something from the Bay to
Jeez.
Madison. Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't have to visit all of the Within Tolerance
Yeah.
guests to be back on
Um,
the show, right?
I know. I uh I hit up I like couldn't work it out. I was gonna see Joe for Cobra, but we couldn't like it was just moving too fast and like our schedules didn't align. So past
Oh,
that,
bummer.
went to Detroit around Detroit to see one of my buddies from college who I hadn't seen in probably like 8 years or something
Oh,
like
cool.
that. So
That's
met
great.
him, like met up with him, met his fiance. We had dinner, and then after dinner, I just started driving to Texas, to Dallas. So like that's like straight south. And went had Thanksgiving with my family that lives down there. My cousin just had a baby, so saw the like 1 month old baby. That was pretty
That's
cool.
awesome.
Then drove 5 hours north to like Amarillo with some to play like Magic with a couple of my buddies, and then from there I was going to South Carolina to see another college buddy, and that's when the car broke down. The wheel bearing gave out like
Oh,
7,000
man.
miles into the trip or something. It was honestly like pretty good luck, all things considered, because I broke down at 8 a.m. Uh, in a major city. Like there was lots and lots of places where it would have been much worse. Uh,
Right.
and I was supposed to be in Massachusetts, where I'm at right now, on Monday, and that obviously that didn't happen. Um, I took it to a place. They were like, "Hey, this isn't happening. We can't do this.
Oh.
You should take this to a dealership." And I was like, "Oh, that's not good." like, so I so I did, and then Monday, my customer, I told him that I wasn't going to be there, but I reached out, and then he reached back out on Monday morning and was like, "When are you going to be here? We're holding this machine for you." And so I traded the car and bought another car and drove up here. basically, as soon as I could. And yeah, I've been in Massachusetts ever since. Um, and hopefully staying here for a while out of the old home base.
That's awesome. Yeah, how does it
Yeah.
feel to be home?
Surreal. Like because of like how intense the trip was and everything, and then essentially like getting here and like going straight to work. Um, it's like it, and then encountering like more car problems and all this other bullshit. Like it still hasn't really like sunk in or whatever that I'm like home. Um, and then I like this weekend I'm going to Florida to see my dad, and then I'm going to London for like 2 weeks after that. So, um, we're not. I'm gonna go see Simon while I'm there.
Oh, awesome.
Freddie, yeah, Freddie.
Yeah, yeah.
Go check out that operation.
That's excellent.
So, yeah, I'm pretty pumped. Get a couple
Well, I'm glad
tattoos.
you made it relatively safe. I'm shocked that it was a wheel bearing. Like when you told me you bought a Subaru, I was like, oh, so like what? Well, you told me you bought a Subaru when we were talking. You were just about to start on this, and then you were like, oh, I broke down, and I'm like, oh, it had to be a head gasket, like for
Yeah,
sure. Like Subarus are notorious, and you're like, no, it's a wheel bearing or something. It's like,
yeah.
really?
Well, the Subaru is fine. The Subaru is running strong. That's in California. That's at the apartment in California right now.
Oh, I didn't. I thought you
This
took that thing across the country.
No, I wish. Um, no, so like I have like quite a few cars, I think like 6 or 7 or something like that that are like kind of spread all over the place.
Right. So you
So
always
like
have something.
yeah, Subaru's in California. I got a van in Utah. I got a truck in Arizona. Uh like they're all pieces of shit, you know? Like the truck's like 88 Toyota pickup that that's just like hanging out with my
Dude, those
buddy.
things are awesome, and you
Yeah,
can
dude,
only find them in Arizona because 'cause they're
oh, dude,
rusted away everywhere else.
I bought it off a meth head in Apache Junction for $500. It running. I drove it out of there and he was
Oh
just
my
like, "Yeah,"
god.
he was like, "It doesn't work," or whatever. It was hilarious. Um, uh yeah. So no, I had a BMW in Boise that I've had for like a while, and I was just getting it back home, and that thing blew up. So
Oh, well,
yeah,
anyway, I'm glad you made it through it. It sounded like quite the adventure. It was cool to
yeah,
see, little pictures of Walter, the with intolerance minifig across the US.
yeah, yeah. He had a good time. He's hanging out too. He's at the shop holding it down.
Nice.
Hmm.
Well, let's get into the chapters that we had for this one. I did a kind of a little 2 or 3 word breakdown of every chapter that we can run through.
Okay.
13, they were talking about multitasking issues and like how multitasking can lead to all of these delays and stuff. 14, he went in and got his tenure denial, searches for other jobs, and then talks to BJ and like makes his deal
Rages.
with her of like, I'll bring in more people. And she's like, I don't believe
Yeah.
you. Good luck.
Yeah.
15, I labeled Rick as a whiny bitch because
Oh
he's
my
just
gosh.
like he's talking to the other teachers and Johnny and just like being a roadblock basically for their discussion. And like even
Yeah.
Charlene is like, can you stop? Like, can you
Yeah.
not do this?
Yeah, "Could you shut the fuck up? I have to teach a class, and I need to know this." And he's like,
R-
"I need to know it even more." And you're like, "What is happening right now?"
yeah, it was it seemed like a very big departure from his character in all the other chapters. I was like,
Mhm.
if the rest of the book was like this, I was like, I wouldn't like it, and I wouldn't like him.
And it would be the worst.
Yeah, but they talk about the marching metaphor, which is kind of a callback to
The goal.
the goal. It's done a little differently, like it's you know
Soldiers.
yeah, soldiers. Well, and then they talk about how tying to the slowest one leads to like I don't know. I feel like in the goal when they talked about the marching metaphor, they kind of alluded to that like everybody would walk at the same pace and there would be no space between anybody. But
Mhm.
really, what happens is that like there's gaps that form, but it's okay because they're still all tied to the constraint.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a good one.
16, they talked more about the like application of the marching analogy,
Mhm.
talking about moving project buffers to the end of the project and not like having all this safety. built up through the
Mhm.
project, and they talk more about like a critical path. 17, Mark presents their implementation of the critical path of the class. They measure progress only by the progress on the critical path now, and they are figuring out how to measure issues with. Oh, so they started having issues with like non-critical path branches, and they're talking about how they're just looking at the buffers for each one of those to see if there's anything wrong.
Yes, and that's an interesting one because it kinda gets into resource management as a constraint, um, and how you can how protecting the critical path, like, can like, to a fault, essentially, can, like, oh, it's like, oh, our non-critical path actually takes longer than our critical path, and it's going to like extend the amount of time because of like how resources stack up.
Right,
That was a
right.
really good one.
Yeah, 18 was the one that I texted you about. That's where he goes and talks to the subcontractors about lead
Yeah.
times, and talking to the contractors in their terms or whatever he says.
Hmm.
That
Got to speak
one,
their language.
that's what it is. You got to speak their
Yeah.
language. So I definitely want to circle back to that one too because I had a lot of thoughts on that one.
Yeah.
19, the Gene Modem crew still isn't done. Uh, they like, they talked to their CEO and he's like, well, it worked on like half of a project. What are you talking about? Of course, you don't get millions of dollars yet.
Yeah. They were upset. They're like, we did what we were supposed to do, and he's like, nah.
Yeah. He's like, you
um.
started it. You know that you
Yeah.
didn't do it.
He's like, you signed up for this without an objective criteria, so, you're
Yeah,
bad."
exactly. 20 was the conundrum of the lack of penalties as being a contractor. So the spacing on his name, but the guy who's in the class who is a subcontractor, is saying
Ted.
like, well, there's no issues if I am late,
Mhm,
like, and then they kind of solve that by realizing that like being in a price sensitive cutthroat market and like playing that game of always being late and competing on price is a lose lose for everybody involved, which was another one like ties back to 18. Like I those ones really hit home, I think, as
mhm,
things that like I've already been working on and didn't really have theory behind.
mhm.
And so it was kind of cool to hear that. 21 was the meeting at the Young Professionals Organization where he kind of like, or BJ kind of was like, oh, maybe he does know what he's doing.
Yeah,
22 is when they discover critical chain and not the critical path. And that
that
like,
was dude, that was hilarious. Like, that one cracks me up because he's just like he basically he's like, "Fuck,
yeah,
that's a really good name." I'm like he, like, spends a lot of time, like, just, like, patting himself on the back over the name of that, and it's like, "Okay, I
yeah.
gotcha."
Well, and then I love that like Jim comes up at the end of the class and is like, wow, your class is so interesting. It's like knowledge is created by the students. You're
Yeah,
like, oh, yeah, it is.
yeah.
Other things from that chapter were like the term resource contention and
Mhm,
learning that like you kind of have to go through and plan the resource contention as part of your critical chain, even if they're not critical path items.
mhm,
Uh, he talks about how a project buffer should be a quarter of the lead time, roughly. And then they kind of, as a class, come to the thing of like, well, it depends on how you deal with resource contention. Like, very often, it doesn't matter which one you do first, but sometimes it does. And like,
mhm.
there's no clear cut way to do that. You kind of have to, like, it's a case by case thing. Um, 23, the deal on the college. I don't know what else was in 23. I didn't write it much about that one.
The last, like, couple chapters are bullshit for the most part, like, it gets into, like, a really weird area where they're just like, um I mean, like, Johnny like, the part with Johnny where it's kinda like a TOC cabal almost, where he's like,
Yeah,
"Guys,
yeah,
guess what?" I'm like, "We got these fucking jokers." Um,
Yeah, it's like they're
dude,
infected with it, blah, blah. It's like,
yeah,
can you
like,
use
what
different terminology? Like,
yeah, like,
this
what
is
is happening here? And then
yeah.
the very end of it is just, like, very it I think it's, like, the whole last chapter is just, like, bizarre.
Well, they do talk
Uh
about in the last chapter the investment principle of, like, time versus just, like, money and, like, getting your return on your investment based on,
mhm,
like, money and
yes,
time that you have, which
yeah.
I thought was pretty interesting and, like, a good way to look at it. So, let's jump back to it, though. Critical path. How have you used critical path and critical chain in your business, and, like, how has this affected you?
Um, so I think I've said this, like, the part that I use a lot is, like, I would say, like, we have 4 main steps in, like, any project that we have, and there's, like, a billion steps inside of those depending on what the project is, but it's, like so our, like, critical chain is our, like, phase 0, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and, like, there is buffer kind of built into each one of those. I don't really have, like, a defined, like, bucket of time as a buffer. But like, so we have like, for instance, like 2 weeks, like I think we just got one. It's like a 7 week project. So like 2 weeks phase 0, 2 weeks phase 1, 2 weeks phase 2, and then like 1 week for phase 3. And that's like design, build, prove, runoff. Almost everything kind of you can almost kind of fit everything into that. And like whatever the steps are inside of that are the steps, and they all like take as much time as they need to take. Like with the idea that like at the end of everything, all of those steps are going to be completed within the allotted time for that phase. Um, and so like instead of like buffering every individual thing, we just kind of buffer the big critical our critical like chain segments, and then kind of go about it that way. And it works pretty well for us. I mean, obviously like as we go and we do like bigger projects, we see like there are certain things that are like out of our control. Sometimes like the project that we're doing right now, this dip raising project, the the robot. Like, we didn't buy the robot, customer bought the robot, and, like, we were kinda just, like, waiting for the robot to show up, which should hopefully show up by the end of this month, and then we can start building, and then once we start building, at some point, they're gonna shut us down for a week because they still have to move everything in the room. Because like, it's a giant ass furnace and a salt pot where they're gonna, like, heat salt up to like 1100 degrees to do like the actual braising process. Um, and it's like very those things are out of our control. Those are like it's interesting to think of like those are technically critical path things, but we can't control them. So like that's a we're kind of like still kind of figure out how to like work those into our system because we typically only control our stuff and only manage our stuff, you know?
Right. So you would need an additional buffer then technically in your quoting for when that merged back into the critical path
Yeah.
for like the way that he describes that, I guess. Right?
Yeah. Yep. And so like our proposals typically will say like um and like they kind of allude to this a lot, which is like every I think like Ted is the one that talks about this cuz like I can relate to him the most because I am a subcontractor pretty much. Um where like any foreman will tell you, which is like me, um that the work is easy. Like no fucking problem getting anything done if I have all my stuff, you know? And so what we
Right. And
put
Murphy doesn't strike.
yeah, fucking Murphy. And
Yeah.
what I put for each phase is like design phase is like 2 weeks after they pay us, like that initial like 50% or whatever. And
Mhm.
then phase one, building phase, it's like, oh, we'll do this in 2 weeks after we get all of our stuff. And and then like prove out phase is like it'll take 3 weeks or whatever once that phase is complete minus QC because we don't measure our own parts. So that's
Right.
like how we're doing it right now. I guess like from a system standpoint, like I I've juggled or like kind of played around with the idea of like letting our customers, because like in a sauna you can kind of you can let people in to a
Right,
certain
right, right.
extent, but like how much do you want to show? Because like you can kind of give people access to like individual, like you can get really granular where like I can give somebody access to like a single task or something. um but like I would kind of want to give them a little bit more of like the full picture, but not like
Mhm.
everything. I don't know. um it's a
That could
work
be
in
tough.
progress.
So
Yeah.
so you said you have 3 main, like, broken out things.
Hmm.
Do you kind of use what the book says though, and like you're okay, so like, stage 1 is 2 weeks, stage 2 is 2 weeks, stage 3 is 2 weeks, and then there's like 2 weeks of bullshit just in case?
um yeah, it's kind of like it's kind of built into each phase,
Okay.
um, individually instead of like one main bucket of time for the most part. So like if we're doing like like building something, like doing a machine setup like what we're doing right now, it's like if all we were doing, and like this is kind of like they talk about this a lot, is like if all we were doing was that one thing, then it's probably a week. But that is never the case, so we just kinda put 2 weeks because like, you just never know, like, oh, like, especially if we're building the tool, like, building a fixture, like, at a customer's facility, I don't know what they have. Like, there's things you just take for granted all the time, like, I
Right.
needed a 3/8 pipe tap, and, like, I went to the tool crib, I'm like, "Hey, I need a 3/8 pipe tap," and the dude looked at me like I was fucking crazy, like, and you're like, oh, okay. I guess that's there's just it's just not in their workflow. They just don't use that type of tool. They had it, like it was like kind of rusty, and like we wire brush to like the shank and
It's
stuff, and
like
like
buried
God,
in a drawer somewhere or
uh,
something.
dude, yes, exactly. It was buried in a drawer, like
Yep.
um, but like piped like eyes wide as a pipe tap, and you're like, oh, so like there's just like all this time that's spent, and like I've done this enough too, like especially if it's the first time you're working with a customer, like the first couple days, like that you're on site, they don't exist. Like it's literally just building relationships with the people around you to like, all right, who are my people? That's like, oh, Kenny. Like this guy's loud. Like every word he says he's just screaming at me. But like if I need something, that's my guy, you
Right,
know?
yeah. He's
Um
the guy who knows where it is.
yeah, and he'll like it's like, "Oh, it's in another building." He's like, I'll go get it. I'll get you whatever you need right now." And then, like, also figuring out kinda what he needs and, like, doing, like, a weird, like, I scratch your back, you scratch mine kinda thing, and it's you're like you just kinda gotta get the lay of the land. You build that in, like, you don't necessarily build that into the price, but it's built into the timeline where, like, I gotta figure out you gotta, like, figure out what's happening.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, it sounds to me like you kind of are treating each phase then like an entire project where you're like,
E
you're like,
yes.
this is what it should take. Then here's some safety, and like this is a project, and then like phase 2 comes around, and like that's your own project.
Yeah. Yeah, because they all have their own like, it is it yeah, because like, they run they can't really run in parallel unless I mean, they can kinda run them in parallel, but, like, we have our stuff set up that it's like we give our customer the opportunity at the end of each phase to, like, discuss, like, what we're seeing, like, do we like it? Especially, like, when it comes to, like, the design phase of things. Um, we're not just gonna, we're not gonna give you something you don't want. Like, we're gonna make sure, especially if it's like, "Oh, our plan is gonna make you spend $35,000, you know, in just materials on top of the money that you're already spending, for us." Like, so, like, we don't start purchasing anything until they have approved the design, because that would be rude, unless it's like something we know we're going to need, like a robot or something. Um, and it's a long lead item. But for the most part, like yeah, like phase 0, our design phase, is like kind of is like sealed for the most part. And like we do that, we review with them, they like give us the okay, and then we move on to the next one, and like we build everything. Most of the time, like from that point on until like phase 2, like building everything phase, like they don't nobody really messes with us there because like we know the plan. The prove outside of things is like when we like right before we get into like runoff, and like just like the hands off, like we're just gonna let this thing run without touching anything. Like, can we do 15 parts or whatever without like having to make any offset adjustments? Um, we go through, like, sit down, see if they're happy with where we're at right now, tool life, blah blah blah, and then once they're good, then we advance into runoff. So it's kind of like a pre-runoff before runoff.
Right, right, right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and it sounds like, yeah, they're not like, the critical path has to go through each one individually. There is no, like, starting this one. I mean, I guess there might be like, "Oh, yeah, let's buy this thing during, pre-runoff or something because oh,
Eh,
plans change or something." But it's very much like, yeah, you can't proceed until the design's bought off, and then you can't proceed until, like, you actually plan it out. I mean, you can't, like, run it off without a plan yet, you know? So, yeah, it
exactly,
makes
yeah.
sense.
And but then like inside of, I kind of wish I could show you my screen right now because like the the dip raising cell that we're working on is probably a good example, is probably our best example of like a like multi oh gosh, multidisciplinary project where it's got like electrical design, it's got automation, like robot stuff, and mechanical design. And that's like all happening like inside of phase 0 are these like concurrent things that are going on, which is like Brian, my automation guy, he's like working on like HMI stuff, like setting up the screens, figuring out what the electrical schematics and like SolidWorks electrical, while Chris, who is doing the mechanical design, is doing that all, and like those things are happening at the same time. The design of it is happening at the same time, and those are both like they're like non-critical to the critical of like we need to the overall chain link is the design of it, and like they're just both steaming ahead, and they're like what they're doing is dependent on each other, like in terms of like how does the rack look, how does the end of arm tooling look, and how is that going to affect the electrical design. Those
So,
things.
I assume when you're quoting, like, things like this, you're talking to your guys that you know are gonna be doing it and asking them for time estimates?
Yes.
So, have you had them read this? Like, and tell them, or do you tell them to not, like, pad their estimates and then you pad it at the end or something?
Yeah, for the most part.
Okay.
They haven't read the book. Not this one. Like we do like read a lot of books, like, but this one we haven't read yet, or they
Okay.
haven't read yet.
But
Yeah.
you've basically told them, like, "Don't give me your, like, worst case, give me your best case, and then I'll figure it out on the end," kinda thing?
Yeah, and then yeah, like so the proposal that we're working on right now for a customer up in Oregon, like essentially Chris and I chatted about it. We Because he went in there, we looked at the parts, kind of figured out a plan. Like we threw together a timeline, and then we went back and looked at it, and it's like, oh, we buffed it too much. We had to like we cut like 3 or 4 weeks off of it because it's like even in terms of safety, this is just ridiculous. It's like I can't justify this much time to do what we're doing here. Probably, and realistically, I think we cut it like $15,000 or something from like 85 to like 70 because it's like timeline wise, I could see it taking this much, but also like for what we're doing, we couldn't possibly justify doing more than like we're already like at the top. We know we're at the top of what this is going to take. It's pretty gnarly, but like it's a collaborative effort for sure.
Okay, yeah. So, how I wanna jump back into what he deals with, like, subcontractors and stuff in 18 and in 20.
Hmm.
So, I texted you because, like, I realized
Yeah.
I've been doing the opposite side of that. Like, I am a contractor basically, and
Mhm.
I mean, I told you, like, this is, you know, silly season for me. Like, this is when everybody needs it tomorrow. Like, like the
Yeah,
last like 4 or 5 jobs I've done have been like
yeah,
4-day turnaround, 5-day turnaround, and it's like I'm fine doing that if the money's there, and like
yeah.
that's the kind of, I guess I always kind of intuitively knew that part of it. Like, if you offer better lead times, you can ask for more money, kind of thing. I mean, it's not like a mind blowing realization. I feel like anybody in this business kind of realizes that, but like you can definitely take advantage of it. Like they
Mhm.
talk about with Ted and like the building contractors. Like, if you go to somebody and like don't let them go to open bid with it and just be like, I'm your man. Like, I will take
Mhm.
this and run with it and get it to you as soon as you absolutely need it. And like people love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And like like they're like imposing penalties on themselves for messing up, which is kind of crazy, but
Right.
like pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it's smart.
Or
It's really, really smart.
yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you
I'm not
ever give people like expedite options on your like plans?
no. No. I don't. Cuz like we're like I would say we're kind of already the expedite option for some of this stuff. Like maybe not, but uh and we're already typically viewed as like kind of expensive, so like I don't know, I mean, like, but it's worth trying, I suppose. Like now that you mention it, like maybe we could be like, yeah, we'll do it in like 4 weeks if you give us like twice the amount of money. And like and I put in there like 24 hour, like almost every contract has like 24-hour access to the facility. And we don't really necessarily hold anybody to that, but it's like you give it to us and like we'll go hog ass wild. Like, we just
Right.
found at Sterling, the place we're at right now, that it's like they don't have to be there. Just two of us need to be there, and they'll just leave us in there. And I like, oh, that's good to know.
That's awesome.
Yeah, once we start like building the cell, or it gets to like crunch time with the cutting project that I'm working on, like we could probably get pretty nasty there. Like, all
Well, and I
right,
imagine being there, like, even if you weren't like working super late, but just being there off hours, you get way more done.
yes, yeah, because like, like in this, it just kind of happens like where we're um like technical experts or whatever. So it's like, hey, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? Like helping some guy like this guy Kenny, my guy there, like figure out he's got like a proto track, like a DPMX like proto track with you can put CNC, you can put G code in it. Um, and like found like on Mastercam's website that they have a post for it. They have like a machine file and a post for it. And I like got it working. Like his guys were giving him like bullshit code, and I'm like, just have him give you the Mastercam file. And then so like throw the Mastercam file in there, like put the actual machine file to it, post it out, and he's like, "Yeah, it's working." He's like screaming at the top of his lungs, and it's like it's one of those things. Like it's not technically value add to the project, but it is value add to the customer regardless. And then
Right.
once, but he leaves at 3:30, and then the real work happens,
Right.
um,
Right.
like always. But that
Yeah,
kind of
he's
goes
your
back to
guy, but you're also his guy.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And so that works out. And but it's like, yeah, then it's like, all right, I guess I'll start my 8-hour day right now. And I guess the expedite fee would be like for me to be like, tell that guy to go fuck himself and just like hammer down. Um
Well, so what about the opposite side of that? Like, when you're buying robots or whatever and you get these lead times, have you ever tried to use that script on them and be like, well, can I pay extra? Can I get that in 3 weeks instead of 4 weeks, or six
uh
weeks instead of 8 weeks, kind of thing?
well, robots are tough, but like for some things, not typically, like for the most part, no. Like with because I mean, right now that's a tough one because like right now, like especially like with automation stuff, like Allen Bradley Siemens stuff, you're just not fucking getting it. Like it's just not happening. Like mostly it's like we will pay extra for something else that's in stock. You know what I mean? That's equivalent. Like we just need it so that we can get this moving. Because like the way, especially like so the I guess short answer is yes because like the way like we're waiting right now for like this stupid robot to show up, and which is fine. That's just like is the way it is. But like I like we are weeks past when we were expecting, like, even on their internal timeline, like, we should be technically finishing the build, like, next week or something.
Oh, geez.
Um, but they like so they we didn't update their like, they didn't update their timeline until last week when we were there, and it's like, "Oh, yeah," like, it's like, "Well, this is not happening." So this project we were expecting to finish, by, like, the end of this year and have, like, fully invoiced by the end of this year, look like now because of, like, delivery of certain things isn't finishing until February, and so, like,
Oh,
we're
man.
which sucks, like, in terms of, like 'cause so we've gotten paid on half of it, but, like, the other payments, are gonna take quite some time, and, like, we're we're like, "Okay, this is, we're like we're we're actually, like, talking to them about, like, other automation projects they have that are, like, small that we can just, like, kinda do time and materials on to, like, kind of, like, fill in, like, the dead time,
Right.
essentially,
Yeah.
while we're just, like, waiting.
Oh, man,
Um,
that's rough.
yeah, that's, that kinda, like, I think I've been talking about this a lot, but, like, it's one of the reasons I want to, like, bring more shit in-house, like, or, like, control more of the process so that stuff like this doesn't happen, because like, it's annoying. Um, it's a little more capital I mean, obviously, it's more capital intensive on our part, but also, like, it's a cash flow thing which they talk about, which is um like 0 times the number is 0, you know what I mean? I'd rather have money coming in than, like, at, like, a loss, or whatever than $0 coming in, because like, at least with money coming in for, like, a net even if it ends up being, like, a net loss or whatever, or, like, an immediate like, you're able to, like, pay bills and stuff with that,
Right. Yeah,
versus,
cash flow
like
is king for sure.
yeah, versus just, like, kinda sitting there, like, I mean, like, I guess we'll just, like, make sure the HMI is, like, really fucking dialed in, dude.
Yeah. So I use the whole leaning on your vendors. This last week, I had an order at Anodize, and like usually they're pretty quick, but they were, they're starting to pick up just like everybody around the holidays.
Mhm,
And I went in because I really needed it done, and I was like, and usually they can get either same day or next day rushes done. And I was like, okay, but like they said they couldn't support that this time, and so I went in and I was like, listen, like I want to give you money so I can get my parts back
mhm,
sooner. I don't care. Like, just you name your price. I just need them as soon as you can do. Like, what kind of expedite can you support? And he's like, I don't know. I guess my girls kind of need some more stuff to like hang on racks right now. So uh, let me get back to you, but I'll do something for you. And then, like, literally the next morning, they called me and they're like, hey, your parts are done. I'm like, cool. That's exactly
yeah,
what I needed.
yeah,
And it wasn't
that
even that
is
expensive either. I was like, all right, this is great.
yeah, and you just had to be like, "Yeah, cash is king, baby, let's go."
Yeah. I was like,
Nice.
listen, just make me a priority. Like, what do I need to do to be a priority? And because it wasn't
Mhm.
that big of an order either. And like, they was like, I'll figure it out. And it wasn't anything special either. It was like type 2 black. It's like,
Oh,
I'm
sure.
sure you're doing like 10 of those a day.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's always a tank fired up with that bad boy. Um, so do you use any, like, outside of the, like, vendor stuff for you and, like, I guess how you see yourself as a contractor, is there anything else, like, critical path, critical chain-wise that you use in your business? Um, or is it, like, not as relevant?
So one thing I do, I think I go back and forth and I use this, but I do the thing where you push all of the safety to the end, or at least
Mhm.
I'm starting to more. Like I used to just have no safety because I was young and stupid, and every 10-minute job was going to take exactly 10 minutes, and 8
Mhm.
times 8 equals 64.
Yeah.
But as I've learned, like, I am not perfect, other things come up, yada yada yada. I've started pushing, I was for a little while pushing safety to like every step of the way, and like that, like they said, like that gives you 200% safety, and then I'm not the short lead time person that I want to be. And so
Yeah.
I have kind of been like, okay, these are the things that I can accomplish. I think it's going to take exactly this long, and then I'll add a day or two at the end, kind of thing.
Mhm.
And so I think that especially since I started reading the book, I've started considering it more like that. Like I think I was just doing it kind of like, oh yeah, this kind of makes sense. But now that I read it like that, I'm like, oh, this definitely makes sense. And I like the idea of like this is the 50% chance of getting it right 100%, and then adding a buffer at the end.
Nice. So how do you schedule? Like when you're making these like this timeline, like where does that live for you? Is that like
Uh,
in an ERP system or
no, I
like in
don't
your
think
in a
it.
spreadsheet?
It kind of is mental-ish. Like, now
Oh
that we
no.
have paperless, we built into our paperless quoting a, like, box that kind of totals up all of the hours that it's gonna be. So, like, run time, what estimated runtime times part number plus all of the setup time. So, I have an rough estimate of, like, this job should take 20 hours. And so,
Mhm.
like, when I'm bidding orders, I'm just making sure that I'm not, like, bidding more than 40, 50 hours a week kinda thing.
Okay. Nice. So like 20 hours, like so you're doing like because it's you and Brad, eight like so if it's you and Brad, is that like 80 hours a week? Do you
Yeah.
consider that,
Yeah,
or
now
is it
that we're
still?
both there full time, for sure.
Mhm.
It's like 80 to 100 hours is, like,
Yeah,
fine.
depending on how nasty you want to get.
Right. Well, like, this time of year, it's like, just I'll take it all. Just, like, whatever. It's all like, onesie twosie stuff. It's all gonna take, like, basically a day or 2 apiece,
Mhm.
maybe a little bit longer if I've got anodized or something. It's like, just I'll find a way. I'll figure it out. I'll just work my ass off this time of year, and then, like, we're gonna take a week off at the end of December for the first time. I think it's gonna be the first week off of every job that I'll have had in, like, 6 years, so I'm
Holy shit.
super pumped.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna
That's
be excellent.
yeah. What are you doing? Just nothing? Are you going
Nothing.
somewhere? Oh yeah.
No, probably play some golf, hang out,
Ugh,
maybe work on cars,
the
stuff
joys.
that I just don't have time for normally.
Yeah. The
See
joys
family,
of
all that.
living in Arizona, being able to golf at like after Christmas. You son of a bitch.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I can golf year round, just in the summer, I have to golf at, like, 5 AM.
Yeah. Oh, you can go during the day if if you're like properly hydrated. It's crazy cheap,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
and the cart's
No, I
free
was just
because they don't want you to die.
right,
Um,
yeah, exactly. They're like, "Alright, we'll try to pamper you as much as we can, but just please don't die on, hole
yeah,
9. Make it
yeah,
to 18, and then you can do whatever you want."
yeah, exactly. So do you like do you do you and Brad quote parts, or do you? Is it just you, or like you're leaning heavily on paperless, and then like uh yeah, I guess is does Brad quote his own parts? Like, if he's gonna take one, or do you decide how that works?
I right now, I'm deciding how that works. Like, if
Okay.
it comes in, I'll look at it real quick and be like, "Is this something that Brad can accurately do right now?" Or, like, "Do I have time for this?"
Mhm.
There's, like, some parts, if I see a print with, like, a lot of GD&T and stuff, I'm like, "Oh, I'm gonna quote that, and I'll figure it out." And, like, if I'm gonna have him run it, I'll talk to him more about it, because that's not his strong suit, is, like, dealing with, tight tolerance, GD&T kinda parts. But I don't know, 60-70% of the work we do is just models,
Mhm.
and it's like, "Brad,
That's
quote
awesome.
this." And he'll be
Yeah.
like, I don't know, does this look good?" I'll be like, "Yep, just send it, like, let's do it."
Yeah. Yeah, like, thumbs up, keep it
Yeah.
moving.
Well,
So,
and that
like
was the big reason we bought paperless, was that I was doing 100% of the quoting for years through, like, a spreadsheet that I had, and, like, the spreadsheet number was never the number I quoted.
yeah.
It got me close, and then it was like, "Alright," and then here's the black magic number on top of that to, like, make it what it actually needs to be.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
we, like, spent a lot of time, because you have, it's like 6 or 8 weeks of onboarding with paperless, where you
Oh,
go through,
shit.
like, you build your gen 1 of your quoting thing, which is just a straight duplicate of your current way of quoting in paperless. So
Mhm.
that way you can just, like, start using the system,
Yeah.
and then you start building version 2, which is, like, the intelligent, where it's looking at the model and looking at the stock, and using material removal rates to calculate a price.
That's really cool. That's really cool. Like quick tangent here on that, on like paperless parts. I was thinking about that um like in further depth about paperless parts specifically, and how like you can probably, and I imagine, I don't know if they're going this direction, but like somebody could probably build on top of this, where because it's like looking at like parts, and then deciding what the price, like when you get to the AI phase, it's looking at like parts to see how it's going to quote those things. um, and like if you took that a step further and you had like your, like say you had like really good part templates or whatever, and it's like if you integrated that to your cam, it's like, oh, when you do parts like this, you program them like this. So I'm going to like, load that file for you. That's like with this list of toolpaths that's like ready to go. You just need to associate the geometry to that
So
thing.
actually, paperless doesn't. There's no AI in it. It is just here is what the stock should be. Here's what the model is. We have three levels. There's roughing, semi finish, and finish. Here are
Hmm.
the MMRs you associated to each one. And then here's like the, gaps between them. Here's what the rough time should be to machine it. And then like it calculates machine direction and all of that. But there is one I saw at IMTS called Machine Research that
Hmm.
is an AI. And they're like you train it on your parts, and that one I think they said like you need 100 parts or something like that minimum to get to it, but you can continually feed it like here's what I quoted, here's what I ran it at, and it'll just get better and better and better. That one's actually really interesting to me. It's not as fully featured as paperless. Like I think paperless
Sure.
really gets the whole like e-commerce thing too. Like that's I've had a handful of customers that are like, "Oh man, I love the fact that I can like see my digital quote and just check out online." And like, machine research
Mm,
doesn't do that yet, but I
yeah.
think that the AI approach is really really interesting, and like I think it could net some really good quoting behavior in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. I must have like been having conversations because I thought paperless was also like an intelligent quoting system that like as you did parts, it would be like you did this like similar thing, but
So it'll
yeah,
it'll
it must
detect
have been.
similar parts with or parts with similar features, but it
Hmm.
doesn't use that information. Like it'll just flag it and be like, "Hey, you've got one similar part." And you can go look at the quote that came from.
Oh, I see. Okay. So it's not like using, I gotcha. Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I don't know which way is better yet. I think that, like I said, the reason we would stick with paperless currently is that like there's a whole lot of functionality built on top of the quoting engine that like I had a customer who reached out and they were like, we gave him the new quoting thing and the digital quote, and he was like, dude, this is like Xometry, but like a small business Xometry. Like I want to
Mhm.
support somebody using something like this.
That's awesome. Yeah. Make it easy peasy for everybody. Makes it easy for you, makes it easy for your customer. Mm,
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah, well, and I love it too because it now keeps all of the requests for quotes straight too, so like it never gets lost in my email.
Mhm. No, that's a huge fucking problem.
Yeah,
The
I think anybody in this business has like realized 8 weeks later, like, oh, I never quoted that part, did I? Well,
yeah.
I lost that business for sure.
Yeah. You're like, "Oh, this," and you, like, go back, it's like, "Hey, can you do this in, like, 2 days?" And you're like, "Yeah, sure, you still need it?"
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and
Yeah.
they're like, who are you?
Uh,
No, we're not using you anymore. Thanks.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like,
So
yeah.
but I'm trying to think what else in like these next the back half of the book really stuck out to me. Um, I think thinking about like a critical chain versus a critical path is going to be a hard thing to change. Like I think a lot of us kind of understand what a critical path is. Like this needs to happen and this and this and this and this. But like
Mhm.
the idea of the critical chain running through like things that might not be directly supporting that. Like, especially if you're coming from the goal and you're like, I have to subordinate everything to the bottleneck. And it's like,
Uh,
yeah, but you kind of have to run through these things that will support the bottleneck. Otherwise, I guess at the end of the day, it technically is subordinating it to the bottleneck, but like it can feel like it's not actually doing that.
Mhm. Yeah. It's like when they're going through, like, subordinating to the bottleneck, how, like, the one that sticks out to me is, like, just the resource management, you know? And how, like, they're like, everything on the critical path is solid. However, non-critical stuff is not solid because, like, we are just resource strapped. And so, like, the things that aren't technically critical are falling behind because we just don't have the resources to handle it. Um, and that's like, and so it's like you're again, it goes back to like 11 or 12 where he's like, you spent too much time shoring up your bottleneck, that like you have one very, very strong chain, or link in your chain that didn't, you fucked up by, you went too hard. Now you have
Right.
this really you have this really strong link that didn't actually do anything for you. So like you take a step back and um like how do we like run these things in parallel. um the the honest like I've never used on like a real side note, like I've never used a PERT chart, and I'm like, that's an interesting little tool there.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
Kind of
I've
neat.
kind of thought about like how do I do a quick and dirty one for like the jobs that are in my shop?
Yeah, I think I think Asana does it.
They'll do a
Like,
few different kinds of charts. I don't remember if that's one of them.
yeah, I don't know, I'll take a look later. But I think it does. Um, but like, yeah, it's a, it's a very interesting like dilemma. Cause, and actually, like, I do have a question, like, kind of bringing it back to like what you're doing, like, if because you're quoting, and like you're using paperless, and you kind of have like two different levels of like for the like two different levels of resources. If you ended up with like 80 hours of like heavy GD&T work, like how do you resource that? You know, do you like end up working a lot more, or are you like, you like push off like you work like 60 hours, Brad works like 20 of your hours, but would possibly, because it's not his strong suit, ends up being 40 of his hours, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. So like a big thing I've been doing is starting to push off tighter and tighter tolerance stuff to him and stuff that I know is going to push him.
hmm,
Because again, like he's a really competent machinist.
yeah,
He's been doing this for years. It's just like he doesn't, if you work in one company, you're not going to see 1,000 parts or something like that. I have no idea how many parts I've made over the years, but it's like I've seen infinitely more variety than he has. So yeah, I have been kind of dividing and conquering, and like if I see something that like might be a little bit out of his wheelhouse, but like I think he can pull it off no problem with a little bit
hmm,
of guidance, I'll just do that. Because like
hmm,
it doesn't take me much to just like run my machine and then walk over and be like, "Hey, how's it going? Everything
yeah,
okay?" Like,
yeah.
did you see this like on the print? And
And you're
just
like, oh,
slowly bring him
interesting.
up to speed. So
Yeah. So then, like, does when you do stuff like that, do you like, do you take the timeline into account there, where it's like you might have to like step in so that like, do you would if he's going to do it and it would take you like 10 hours, do you like a lot like 20 or like 15 if he's doing it and you're helping him, or
no,
is it
but
like ten
I'll
ten?
I'll allot exactly how much I think it's going to be, like how much it
Mhm.
should be. And then if I see, I guess I kind of look at, the quote unquote resource buffer. Like if I see that kind of dwindling, like, oh, like he
Or like,
has 10 hours of machining left and there's like, you know,
or
1 day left. It's like,
yeah.
all right, dude, I'm going to take this over, like go run the
Mhm.
parts that I'm running or something like that. Like I'll
Yeah.
jump in and I'll just be very conscious of like how much time is left in the job and how much actual work is left in the job and be like, all right, does he need more than just like a look over the shoulder and like a couple words? Like, do I need to step in and help them out or something?
Mhm. And and again, like, right now, that's all, like, rattling around in the old noodle for the most
Oh yeah,
part. Oh,
oh
shoot.
yeah.
So,
Well,
like
like that's why. So a big thing is like we are not afraid to say no. Like I know a lot of people like don't like to say no to people, and
mhm,
I'm totally okay with just being like, "Th- this is not ours this time. Like we could do it. Like I've said no to a lot of parts this month that are like, yeah, I can do them, but like the opportunity cost of like taking on something that has like this pitfall and like, oh, it's going to take up all this time because I've got to run an end mill like, 10xd. It's like a 20 thou end mill. Like,
mhm.
nah, it's not ours this time. Sorry. I know you have other suppliers. Like,
Yeah,
you know, I,
yeah,
I, I would much rather take on stuff that I know I can knock out of the park and like deliver on and make really happy customers all day, every
yeah.
day.
That's, there's another really good book. There's 2 really good books, like, in that, like, vein, which is, like, The Pumpkin Plan, and Raving Fans, which is, like, essentially both of them are, like, Pumpkin Plan talks a lot about firing customers, but, like, also, like, you, like, fire customers to focus on the customers that you're, like, you can satisfy and that are going, like, you essentially can, like, take care of each other. And Raving Fans is another one where it's like, you can't be everything to everyone, but the things that you can be for people, you just fucking crush, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what you're doing, which, like,
Yeah.
it works, you know?
Yeah, and, like, as we grow, I'll just take on more and more work, and, like, the thing about, creating raving fans and not having read the book, but, like, they wanna keep coming back to you, and they wanna give you more work, so, like,
Mhm.
they will fill excess capacity very often, at least in my experience.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess, like, as you, like, talking about scalability here, like, at some point it's got to get out of your noodle, right? Otherwise, like, you're going to, like, own the process forever, and, like, it becomes, at, like, some point it's unwieldy and unscalable, and you might, like, burn yourself out, which is bad. Burnout is bad. Um,
Yeah.
hot
I get
take.
it, once a year maybe.
Yeah.
I'm definitely feeling it right now. It's like, "Man, I gotta push through these next couple weeks, and then I get a little break."
hmm So, did you ever think about using, we, when I was at South Bay, we ran, like, the whole machine shop, like, for NPI stuff, which is kinda like everything you're doing essentially is NPI. We did that all entirely in Asana just to, like, keep track of everything.
I
You ever
think
think
we'll
about
end
going
up
to
there. We used Asana at my last job, and I think I was unhappy with how it was implemented, and so I kind of have a bad taste in my mouth from it.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, I started using it at Protium shortly after I hired on there because I was like, "Oh, this is good." And then, like, it just becomes, like, so unwieldy if you don't do it right.
Mhm.
Like, if you try to put too much into Asana and have it do too much, like, there's a million people or a million comments and it's just too much work kind of, and like that's why we've avoided ERPs as well. As like,
Mhm.
man, my time is already so precious to me. Like I don't want to have to input data. Like that's
It yeah.
the
Yeah.
absolute last thing I want to do.
Yeah. It's, like, it's always such an interesting conversation because, like, at a certain point, like, you have to put in the time, right? For it to be like, so that you can, like, kind of start to step away and not have to, like, you have to build the system so you can let the system kind of, like, flush out and manage and then, like, grow it a little bit.
Right.
Or I would imagine, like, in order for the growth to occur, you're going to have to, like, l- s- manage it some other way than you're the old noodle.
Yeah, I completely agree. It
Yeah.
it gets uh, like the nice thing now is I at least have paperless handling. Like Brad doesn't ask me anymore. Like, oh, what do we have to do? Like, what are the jobs? Like
That's
all
awesome.
of that I see in paperless. He sees when it's due. He sees quantities, all of that stuff. I would like the thing I'm missing right now is like I'd like him to see like, oh, there's tooling that hasn't been ordered for this, or there's material that hasn't been ordered for this, or stuff like that. And like right now, it's just me being like, hey, dude, order material for this. Like I
Hmm.
can't do that. So
Yeah. This paperless doesn't have anything to handle that.
no, they're
Like,
pretty specific about not being an ERP and
No,
like
sure.
avoiding things like that, which I completely understand. Focus on what you do best again.
Mhm.
But Asana's not a bad idea. I might look into that again because I know that they both have an API, so I bet you I can pass a lot of that information off.
Yeah.
Like I can probably auto generate tasks when an order is created in Asana and then just have it like auto populate a lot of it.
Yeah, like, and Zapier's pretty good at, like, doing some, like, integration there too. Cause like, you just like, at least, like, what we did is, like, the part is the task. Like, so, like, we had a project, like, instead of, like, doing right now for ZC, each part is its own project because, like, it's kind of like a big thing where, like, we're doing more process development than just, like, making parts. And but like at South Bay, each part was a task, and it was like just making parts was the project, and then like you have tasks inside of that, which is like order material, order tools, blah blah blah, and then like it's it becomes a lot more manageable that way, and it's nice for the visibility of things too. Like, in like, I mean, it's always so hard, like, when it's just the 2 of you to, like, justify, like, kinda spending time when you're, like, sitting right next to each other or whatever to be like,
Right.
"Oh, I'm fucking putting this task in," or whatever, and you're like it's
Oh, I
like,
sent you a test, bro. It's like, dude,
yeah,
just turn your head.
yeah,
Yeah, no, well, and like I know deep down that like that's what I need to be spending time on. Like, cause it's not just going to be us forever. I need to put this stuff in place. Like that's the whole reason that I've kind of justified putting off hiring anybody for as long as I can was to make sure that the systems are in place so that like we're not doing giant company culture shifts with a bunch of employees kind of thing.
yeah, yeah, so, like, I guess kinda transition like, this kind of is a good segue into, like, Debris Industries' question about, um the human, or did he say automation versus human as next investment?
Oh yeah,
Uh,
so I think he said that because last time I mentioned hiring someone, and like
yeah,
I had been so gung ho on like a robot or something for years.
mhm,
Um, I still want an automated 5 axis thing, but like it's kind of hard to compare, a $40,000 a year employee to a $500,000 or $750,000 machine.
yeah, yeah. That's also that's kind of unfair, because like, you could put a pallet like, if you're doing a $40,000 a year employee on the machines that you already have, now, like, that could be $100,000 pallet system or $100,000 automation system. That's like a little bit more money up front, but like kind of ROIs, potentially ROIs, year one if you're able to keep it running like 3 shifts or whatever, because then that's like three $40,000 a year employees, and it just like goes and goes and goes and goes.
Right. Well, I don't have the tool capacity on the brothers to support a palette system. I don't think, at least, like with the high
Mhm.
mix, because it's like three of one part, two of another, and like I could probably sneak out like 3 or 4 part numbers worth of stuff, maybe if I'm really lucky and they like overlap. But
Yeah.
like like
The-
today I was using what 4 or 5 different tools for one part that were like I can't use them on anything else because they were like, 8XD aluminum stuff. And then, like, in the other machine, I had 304 running, and that's 5 or 6 tools on its own.
Yeah. The brother, you don't spindle load those, right? Are you like, is it similar to the robo drill where you like kind of slam it into the turret?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Dude,
Yeah. So you could technically can do that with a robot. They have them in the, what, E plus or
it's
one
the
of
plus
those.
K.
That's
Yeah.
what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, you grab the taper and slam that fucker into the turret. It works really well. Like,
Yeah.
it's pretty sick.
Yeah. It's really cool.
You get like 60, 70 extra tools in that thing.
Those
You
things
know,
are
it's
so expensive, though. Like, it's
well,
insane how expensive they
th-
are.
that is, yeah, that's like a $500,000 robo drill. which is, good machine. Like it's cool,
Oh
but
yeah.
also, like I think I would probably you get less pallets, but more capability out of like a MAM or not a MAM, like an MX 330 is about 550 or whatever,
Right.
90 tools, 10 pallets, but like much bigger kind of thing. Um, Also like 40 taper big plus. You can get pretty nasty with that thing. Um, but yeah, like that one in particular, very, very expensive. Would agree. It's like almost like a two or $300,000 thing. But, if you're building it or like, we were building it together because we're boys, we could like
You
we
know
could
I'd come
probably
to you for any automation
we could
needs.
we could probably throw that together. I guess
Okay.
like it's worth considering. Like for instance, one of the guys that works for me was a methods automation guy, like worked with those things pretty like and methods at one point like hired me to like go help a customer out in Plymouth to deal with them. Like it's it's not like a very crazy thing to like just like a very tapered gripper, slam it in and call it a day.
Right.
But like, yeah, like I don't know. I would always err on this, at least like right now, and like the way that things are going. Um, I'd probably go for automation because then you can kind of like you can continue to like build your systems like with just the two of you, um, without having to do like anything culturally and kind of figure out what the hell you guys are doing, like and how you want to grow, and then start to bring people in, and then like also kind of allows you to instead of bringing in like $40,000 a year guys, maybe bring in like 80, $100,000 a year guys, and like kind of keep everybody at
Right.
like a level instead of
Yeah.
having like different tiers of it.
Well,
I like
and that I should rephrase that. Like we are investing heavily in time right now as far as automating programming and setup. Like that, I
Mhm.
think that that's where we need to invest before we even consider a robot or anything like that. Because, like, you said on the last one, like if you don't have a dialed tool library or like collision detection, what's the point in having like a robot when you're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna load a pallet on my fourth and then like crash the shit out of my machine because
Yeah,
I don't know what I'm
yeah.
doing, kind of thing. So
Mhm.
that's like that's the smart money I think for us to spend right now first,
Oh,
and then
100% agree. Because like, and that is like, I mean, that I would say that's an automation move.
yeah,
You're
yeah,
just like
exactly,
yeah, big time.
yeah,
That's like worth its weight in gold. Like a good tool library is like insane how much that affects your workflow and your ability to like just pump programs out.
yeah,
Um, it's
yeah. So
cool.
we're spending money there first, and then we'll see kind of where we're at because we're also, I've said it on the show before, but like I'm considering a M200, and if we did that, we that very well could be robot loaded if we needed to, but we also were talking about just doing standard stock sizes too, like a 3 jaw chuck and like 2.5 inch stock, and like
Mhm.
everything is made out of 2.5 inch stock. Doesn't matter if it's big or small, just make it.
Yeah. That would be an interesting one. I mean, I would like heavily look at a robo job for that thing, you know?
What's that?
Oh, brother. It is a beautiful automation system, I believe out of like Belgium. Um, where it's like a cart on a slant, and like they mill load and lathe load. But like they have this gorgeous HMI where you kind of build the part um in like on the screen in like very simple geometry, right? Like you're not like loading like the actual part file. It just needs to know like what the diameter or whatever is that you're going to be grabbing on, like raw and finished. It has two grippers that you set, and then it has like a really cool like pegboard style um, uh, like track there that you can like move. It'll tell you like, oh, my stock is this size. Like you put in the stock size, and it's like, oh, we'll put the pegs in these locations, and then you do that, and then you like stack your material up, and then it like goes and grabs it. It's like $125,000.
Yeah,
It's
I'm looking at it right now. It looks pretty sweet.
It's awesome. It's one of the best there is, for sure. They're one of
Yeah,
the only
that's really nice.
yeah. They had a really, really small booth at IMTS, like, kinda, like, way it was by Sill, like, way in the corner, you know?
I don't
Um,
think I made it out there actually.
yeah. It
Huh.
was on the main machine floor, but, like, there's nobody around them. It was kinda crazy. Uh,
I'll definitely go looking more into these. Yeah, because the other thing we had looked at is Brother has their own robot now for those machines as well, but it's not as nice as this kind of looks like. Like it's only what is it, a 4-axis robot? It's not a full like six
so
axis.
oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of a cross between like a Iroa loader, but like with a little bit of an arm kind of thing. I'll send you the video of it.
Yeah.
The cool thing about it is it like bolts right onto the side of the machine, takes up almost no floor space, and it runs through the control, which is
Okay.
neat.
That is
But
cool.
we'll see. That the nice thing about that M200 is like I can get it, I can hand load it with like hydraulic work holding, and
Mhm.
then if we see the need and we're like, oh yeah, this makes sense, we can add on automation later.
Yeah, for sure. Sick. Oh,
So
man.
let's talk next book.
Yeah.
So
Extreme ownership? That's what we're
yeah, I've
doing?
got my copy somewhere around here. I'm pumped to do it. Like I said, I've already, man, I've read this 2 or 3 times now. Because
Yeah.
I read it on my own, and then the last place I worked read it as a company, and like it can maybe be a little reductive at sometimes because like he really really wants to hammer the
Yeah.
point of it home, but at the base of it, man, I think it's such an important lesson and something that like if you're not doing it in manufacturing, you have to be doing it because like it is the root of so many problems.
Mhm. Yeah, it is, you just see it everywhere. Like, accountability is huge, right? Because that's the big thing is, like, essentially, like, extreme accountability. Like, you just own everything even if it's not your problem. Like, you work with some, like, I don't know, I got an example today, like, the programmer at this shop was like, I guess Methods is coming in to do a data server update, like, or data server install on their 2 Kiwas or something. And he's like, we got to pull all the programs off and like take pictures of all the offsets. And I'm like, hey, like we can just like pull that information off. And he's like, yeah, oh yeah, I know. And you're like, but like, why would you say take pictures if you knew that? You
Right,
know?
yeah.
And it's
Can you
like,
just say I didn't know that, let's do
yeah.
that?
And then, like, almost everything we talked about, it was a really bizarre conversation because everything we talked about, he initially didn't know. Then I would say it, and he'd be like, "Oh, yeah, obviously," you know? And you're like, didn't know what power grip was. Like, I put power grip in this place because we're doing, like, pretty like, little parts. They have really tiny like, every tool I think the biggest tool is, like, 5 millimeters, and it's only for roughing. All the finished tools are like the biggest finished tool is like 2 millimeters,
Oh,
um,
geez.
and we're using
Yeah.
all Frasia stuff. So like, and it's a 15,000 RPM spindle. So like, I mean, it's not ideal, but like, we're just gonna crank everything max RPM essentially, um, and we're hitting like 2 thou profile tolerance to 3 datums. So like, and everything they have currently is side lock holders. And he's like, well,
Oh,
those
geez.
tool holder, he's like, power grip's expensive. It's like, yeah, but I'm going to eat all of my tolerance just on the run out of that tool.
Yep.
Like, I have to. And he's like, oh yeah, of course. Like, okay.
Well, this was a
Like,
fun conversation. I'm glad we
yeah,
went round and round.
it was just really bizarre. When it's like, and like exactly like what you said is I like, I don't know is like absolutely an acceptable answer. Like, it's okay. Like, nobody's expecting you to know everything. Like, I would prefer if you didn't know to say, I don't know, because then we can work with that. We can like teach each other, it's fine.
Right.
Um, like, if I don't know something, I'm going to tell you I don't know. Like, or like somebody called me today and they're like, "So what is like how much would this cost to automate?" And it's like, "What do you mean? Like what's your goal?" Like I don't know. Like I don't know like what do you want to do? And like he's like, "Well, I was thinking it's like, well, if we're automating this, like I could see it being like that." And like, two grippers and he's like, "No, no, no grippers, no grippers." It's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, I want to do a pallet system." And it's like, "Okay, well then be like," and then we kind of like drilled down to what the actual goal was, which is like, how do you automate for a specific part, but also future proof it into something, um, like if this part goes away, how do we make that better, kind of thing. And like, good, cool. Um,
Yeah, but yeah, saying I don't have enough information is more than okay.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, or
Um,
just being
eh,
like, "I screwed up. I'm sorry.
that
I did not see that. Like,
That
my bad."
that yeah, that is such a like, it is so hilarious, like, kind of how disarming that is, It's like, "What happened?" It's like, "Crashed the machine." It's like, "What do you mean?" It's like, "Crashed it." Like, "I
Yeah,
fucked it up." Like, "It happened." Like, "Here we are." Like, "You wanna yell at me, you can yell at me, but, like, we gotta fix this now." Like, so, like, can we just move on from this, like, and fix the problem? Like, 'cause you being upset isn't actually gonna fix the problem. Like, I'm telling you, I did it. Like, you don't have to go on a witch hunt now. Cause like, I've seen it's so fascinating, like, another, like, little anecdote is, like, you you can see how some people, like, don't do it, though, in manufacturing, especially, like, old school manufacturing because, like, it becomes a, like, finger pointing thing, you know? Um, uh, where, like, you will get in trouble, like they're looking to reprimand somebody and like kind of like string them up for crashing instead of like moving on and like just like working past it so people start to hide things instead of owning it. But then like you I've worked at a place where the fucking CEO of the company is like was in his office like really dark like reviewing security cam footage for like 4 hours trying to like find a crash. And it's like, is this the best use of your time? Like, who fucking cares, dude?
oh,
Like,
jeez.
relax. Um,
Yeah, well, and
uh,
you have to, like you have to engender a culture that doesn't like, actually doesn't penalize people for making mistakes. Because like,
yeah.
the thing too is, like, if people start covering that stuff up, all of a sudden you start making scrap or something. Like, we had a machine at one of my jobs that was crashed so hard that the XZ was out, like, 10 thou top to bottom on the fixture that we were supposed to be running, like, after the crash,
Holy shit.
and it wasn't the fixture, like, we pulled the fixture off and inspected it, and, like, that was fine, and, like, literally the whole Z of the machine had shifted, and they had to come back in and, like, thank
Oh,
goodness, so they looked at it and they were like, "Oh, this is really bad," and we're like, "Yep," and they're like, "Alright, we're gonna try one thing before we, like, really dive into this," because like, they were gonna have to bring in like a forklift, take the entire Z axis off the machine basically to
oh
realign
my
like,
God.
and what they ended up doing is like, thankfully they could basically like bend the machine back into place.
Yeah, they just crashed it the other way intentionally.
Well, like they just used the leveling feet to like twist out the twist basically, and like it worked and
Whoa.
it all was fine. Like they checked it with the block and everything and it was fine. The machine still made good parts, but like,
That's
dude,
crazy.
but like it was one of those things where like the guy almost didn't report it. Like, it was in a company too that didn't really knock you for
Mhm.
mistakes, but like he just, I don't know if it was like past experiences or like other shops he had worked at, but he was just not like almost not going to say something. And like thankfully it was loud enough that like, people get to talking when there's a big
Yeah.
crash.
And it's like, well, what happened here? And it's
Yeah,
like, well, it happened. Like, I guess I crashed it. We crashed.
you're right.
Um,
The
I've
machine
only
crashed itself.
Yeah, I've only seen I have like I I when I was working at the wheel manufacturer in South Carolina, like a machine essentially did crash itself. It was very bizarre. And even though, like, it happened and it was, like, almost unavoidable, like, they were still trying to, like they still wanted to, like, roast this setup guy. 'Cause essentially, he had just finished setting up the part, and he sent the machine home, or, like yeah, he had just and yeah, he sent it home, but what happened is, like, this machine, it was very old. It was an IMT, like, some Italian wheel specific, um lathe, vertical lathe, and it had physical limit switches. So it had moved off of home and, like, quite a ways before the switch, like, undepressed, you know. And so now
Hmm.
home was here, not up here,
Oh
and
no.
so, like, he had just finished setting it up, like, was ready to go 100%, and, like, these machines are kinda crazy because, like, it had a pallet changer, like, where it'd pick the whole chuck up and move it had 2 chucks, and it'd move the chucks and then set it back down. So,
Oh
like,
wow.
the chuck it was really tight, but, like, the trucks were crazy expensive, like 50 grand. Um, and it was like you're just basically holding onto this cast wheel, like, with toe clamps on the bead seat on the bottom, like, that's all you're doing because you need to be able to get everything. Um and so he at 100% rapid with, like, a 4-inch diameter boring bar. You have a it was like
Oh
an
no.
18-inch it was like an 18-inch wheel spinning at, like, 1,800 RPM. It just boom came across and, like, was thought it was going in on top of the machine or on top of the part, but just wiped it out, like, ripped this it sounded like a bomb went off. The wheel, because it was cast, was just, like, shattered, boom, and all kinds of pieces. The chuck was top tooling on the chuck was destroyed. Um, and they're like, "What happened?" You know, like, it was, like, not his fault, like,
Right.
at all. There was, like, nothing, like, he would have never caught that in a million years.
Yeah.
And he's
It
like,
happens, but it's just
yeah,
so rare. Like I had
yeah,
a Kitamura at my old job that was like that too. Like you would hit reset, I think, and it would just kind of forget where it was. And so you'd go to start the beginning of the part again, and it would just like try to plunge. Like if you like you were going from home to like Z 4 inches or something, it would just think wherever it started from was home again, rather than like returning to home and starting the program over. And
yeah,
like thankfully I caught it, but like it just like tried to plow this face mill like down through the vise. I was like, no, what's going on?
yeah,
And then like
yeah,
like we just learned to like never really mess with that machine.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that kinda happened on, like, on an end shoe. Like, sometimes when you like, if the Z wasn't at home, like, you had the tool and the spindle, like, this happened, it was kind of a bummer, like, with a probe where, like, the tombstone was, like, way up, and I, like, started the program, and it just went and, like, just
No.
it didn't take the body out, but, like, it crushed the stylus before I
Oh.
caught it. Instead of going the other way, it was like, "Oh, yeah, so forward, more forward." Like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, totally. That's exactly what I wanted."
Ugh.
Um,
Boy.
yeah,
Well,
that
yeah,
was
so everybody go out, get your copy or your Audible book of Extreme Ownership. We'll start that up pretty soon here. We'll announce on the with Intolerance or Instagram, what the chapter breakup will be and all that. But yeah, look
mhm,
for that coming soon. Um, I'm looking forward to it because, like I said, I think it's a super important topic. Like
yeah,
it is
yeah,
very, very important for everybody.
and you've talked about it on the podcast a lot. I'm pretty excited. Like, I've had it in my Audible library for a while, and I'm like, "Sick. Let's fucking fire this up."
It's good. It's an easy read. He has a lot of war stories that kind of illustrate all of these principles and stuff.
Yeah,
And it's one of those things that, like, I think if you work by yourself or something, you're going to be like, well, oh, of course I do this. But like, if you work in a company and you kind of think that like there are some toxic people, like this will give you the words to describe their
mm,
behavior, and like you'll be
yeah,
like, oh yeah, this is why it's toxic, and this is why it needs to stop, kind of thing.
yeah, nice. Um, Last thoughts on Critical Chain?
I really enjoyed
You
it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think the biggest things were like realizing kind of how I want to steer my business, and like chapter 18, I was like, yeah, this is exactly like the kind of business I'm trying to be, and like this is what that means for my customers, and like words to use to sell to them. I realized also like
Mhm.
making it that win-win. And I think kind of realizing that, like, yeah, maybe in the past and like or present, I've kind of put 200% safety, and that like I need to reevaluate how I plan steps and how I put in that safety so that like I'm still covered, but I can also like really figure out how much time something's going to take.
Mhm. It's like more intentional buffering instead of
Yeah,
like, yeah, because like it is wild how you're like, oh, this would take like 2 hours, so that we'll say 5, and like
right.
you just do that over and over and over again. And it's like, well, this part's gonna take like 2 weeks now,
Yeah.
like programming, 1 week, and you're like, whoa, relax.
Yeah. What about you?
I want to like I think the big thing that I want to work on is kind of like letting like letting people in, so to speak, like letting my customers in, so I can kind of like involve the critical steps that are outside of my control, like adding those into our project management, because like that's the part that is like really hairy, for us at the moment. And then kind of possibly like adding like buffer to things, like a more intentional buffer, because like it, I guess like a visual representation of the buffer, I should say, because it's there. And we try and like I said, we don't buffer each step, we buffer the phase. But like that buffer is not represented anywhere, so probably representing the buffer visually in Asana,
Yeah, I like
is,
that. I would love a way
yeah,
to like monitor that buffer. Like for how they say like, oh, like if the buffer starts depleting, you're doing something wrong. Like you need to start checking that out.
yeah, yeah. Like it's interesting because like you get the impression that they're tracking like, I mean, it was written in like the '90s or something, where like you can kind of like they're tracking everything like with paper and pencil. Like it has to be, because like Rick, when they're talking to the vendor, he's like, oh, it seems like you're computerized,
Right.
which is like
Yeah, like that's
hilarious, which is
fancy.
like a hilarious statement, which is now, which is like, oh wow, high tech. Like my buddy in Detroit, he was telling me like his dad owns a drywall company, and he is like, in this day and age, still not computerized. So like he'll get drawings of like construction drawings, and like pull like the physical drawings, not PDFs, and he'll like pull out a rule and like do the whole like do all the math to scale
Oh,
it and everything.
jeez.
And it's like, he was saying it like drives him nuts, because he's like, Dad, there's like 150 softwares that do this for you. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Um, and like, it's kind of funny that it's the opposite now. Um,
Well,
but
two
like,
things that you said made me remember things. So one, letting customers in is something I also really want to work on. I have no idea how to do it, but I know Justin and Jem from the Parts Department podcast. I don't know if you listen to that, but
uh-uh.
they were talking about wanting something like that for their customers, kind of like the what is it, Pizza Hut or Domino's, like the tracker that
Yeah,
they have where you
yeah,
can like see like, oh, my pizza was loaded in the oven. Like I think it would be super cool for me to be like, oh, Dylan started your part on Op 10 in this machine. Like I think that would be super cool to be able to like deliver to my customers. I have no idea how to do it, but I think
yeah.
it would be super cool to do that.
That would be pretty slick to do, like
Yeah.
would love to be able to like, it's an interesting like, you let them in, like it's a level of transparency that's like that's comfortable for everybody. Where like
Right.
you're not like, they're like, oh, like you only have that program like half done and like all this other stuff. Like you've posted this program like 15 times. What the fuck are you doing? But it's just like, yeah, it's like op one setup is going great kind of thing.
Right.
Um,
Maybe I should look into Asana then and see what kind of graphs I can generate or something. If I could generate something like that and then
mhm,
only let them see the graph. Because I
yeah,
mean, not only would it be nice for my customers, but it would save the time of like them emailing me or texting me like, "Hey, can I get a status update?" It's like, just look at your part like on your web browser. You're done. Like saves
Yeah.
both of us time.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the
That
other thing that I remembered from 24 was they were talking about like they tried to computerize this whole like resource management thing and how it like ended up being a nightmare for them. And it was because the whole 8 times 8 equals 64 thing again. Like
yeah.
they were trying to be too precise, and it like made me realize that maybe like I've always been like, oh, maybe I need to be more precise for my quotes and stuff. But it's like I think the quote that I wrote down was that um, you can't be more precise than the noise in the process. And so,
Mhm.
like, if something can take plus or minus 3 days, or like plus or minus, let's say an op can take me plus or minus 2 hours. If I'm within that ballpark for my quote, that's good enough. Like,
Yeah.
that's more than good enough.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, am I still making money doing this? Like, then, you know, good to go. Like, yeah, because like it's interesting. Like, it kind of gets into a certain aspect where it's like, if you spent 2 extra hours on the quote to like get it more precise, like, and then it took the extra 2 hours, like, you kind of just ended up at a wash, right?
Right.
Like,
Right.
like,
Exactly.
um, and, like, they talk about the 80/20 rule, but they talk about it in, like, in a way that I um, hadn't really, like, thought about before, where it's, like, 20/80 or something. It was a really bizarre like, I was like, I kind of agree with that, I don't really agree with it," but, like, um, so I always think of, like, the 80/20 rule as, like, going to the like, lumping 80% of your shit together. Where it's like, all right, I'm gonna focus on my 80% and like kind of figure like the 20% is the anomaly. But they were talking about focusing on the 20% and like kind of shoving the other 80% off. And I'm like, hmm. I like still haven't like I I guess like every other time that I've read this book, I've taken away what I have taken away, which is like to say like the part that stuck out to me the most, having worked at Methods, is like Methods timelines are really big because they've been fucked over on so many projects before. Like, and I've been a part of two of them.
Right.
Of like two of the worst projects they ever worked on, like because they were just like absolute sales driven fucking nightmares. Um, and so like you end up like they buffer every single fucking step when and like so I built my system kind of based on that, which is like the design, the build, the runoff, the whatever, and like adding the buffer into those things. Um and what the fuck was I talking about? The 80/20 stuff?
Hmm.
And like and how your like you kind of let your past experiences start to dictate what's going on, and like instead of and not using your past experiences to like build a better process, you using your past experiences to like try and save your ass.
Right.
and
Yeah. To
and
become
like
like more of a curmudgeon than ever.
Eh, yeah, and you end up, like, with these crazy inflated timelines and, like, yeah, 80% of our work is going to take a really long fucking time. Or you use that to be like, those really gnarly projects become our 20%, we're not gonna do those because, you just either, like, we don't want to develop the process to get this going because like, if like the 80 is something small, like a job shop sell. We know what that's going to take. It's very safe. That's what we want. Uh, like it's repeatable. The 20% is yucky because like we have to think about it. And like every time we've done it in the past, we've haven't learned from our mistakes and we're just going to inflate the timeline to like 40 weeks to do this thing or something. And, uh, and like just scare people away from doing that kind of work.
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Yeah.
I think we both have homework to do then, and we can check in on that on the next one. I'm gonna look into Asana just on starting it up and seeing what kind of integration. And it sounds like you want to work on seeing if your customers can be led in a way that makes sense for you.
Yeah, yeah, especially because like, they're like I was seeing their Gantt chart, it's like, I really don't like looking at Gantt charts, it's like, there's, like, a laundry list, like, this big or whatever, and it's like, I don't like, I'm, like, drawing lines because like, at the top is, like, what the dates are, and you're like, "Well, so this starts, like, I don't know, like, here somewhere." It's like, good like, there's gotta be a better way to do this, and,
Right, you're,
like
like, plotting coordinates and shit to figure out when
yeah,
you're supposed to do
yeah,
stuff.
and it's like, I don't like this, but, yeah, I think, like, I've done it once, but then you get kinda, like, weary about, like, "Well, do I put this in here, or do I start another project without them in it?" I don't know, but if you wanna like, chat about Asana, you can hit me up because, like, I mean, we're in it, like, all the time.
Yeah, I'll definitely talk to you about it because you clearly haven't used it for good, and,
Yeah,
the last time I used it, it was the thing that everybody forgot to do, so it was very rarely up to
yeah,
date. Like, it was mostly up to date, but, like, you would miss things because people would just forget about it, like, they'd be doing
mhm,
the work and not updating Asana. So it was, like, only sort of up to date, and there was just, like, so much stuff in it that, like, you just get lost. You're like, "Oh, no, of course I didn't see that project come up because I had, like, 40 tasks pop up into my to-do list today, and, like, you
yeah.
were at the bottom. I'm sorry."
Yeah. They've recently added, like, a cool feature that is nice. I don't know what level you get it at, but it's called, like, a recurring task. So, you can have it, like, recur, like, every day, every week, every month, and, like, if it comes up, like, you can just, like, click it and, like, say you did it or whatever, and then it just, like, makes the task again with the new
Oh, cool.
deadline. Yeah.
Nice.
So it's like, "Oh, missed it," or, like, for following up or, like, ordering material, like, you can make it, like, yell at you a lot or whatever. Um, it's they like, there's some really sick features, like, I really like it, and, like, sometimes I get way too like, it's hard to, like, not get crazy jacked up about it because it's like, "Oh, I can automate, like, everything." Um, uh, and cool stuff, yeah. Yeah, I think, like, it worked really well for making parts, like, and, like, because like, I had all the programmers, like, we had this crazy, disgusting, unwieldy spreadsheet before, and, like, I transferred it all like, the engineering team, like, before me was using it for, like, MPI, like, just, like print evaluation, part model evaluation, whatever, and, like, we converted the spreadsheet of the parts of the programs to Asana and,
Mhm.
like, just had a visualization where, like, each programmer had a section, and, like, we had un like, unassigned programs and what each person was doing and then like completed programs and like we just like because there was like a nice visual and people were able to like grab the programs or whatever it just like we ran through the programming backlog like so fast because it's like it's just sexy, it's like got a nice like sexy look to it where you're like, oh, okay, and like you can do like section automation and whatever. um
Yeah. I'll definitely look into it. I think if I can get it working where I can have templates that are then populated by paperless pushing through the API. I think that would be just fantastic. So I'll definitely look into it and we can check back
Yeah,
in. You can
yeah.
poke me with the task next time and make sure that I
Yeah,
did something about it.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
I'll, like, start the Purdium one, I'll be like, "Alright, Dylan, you're in it now." Like like, "Wait, what?" Um, yeah,
Awesome.
cool.
Well, I really hope everyone enjoyed this book. Definitely write in and let us know what you thought. And then, yeah, like we said, pick up Extreme Ownership, and we'll keep you abreast of when the next recording session will be. Thanks, Chris. Thanks everyone for
Yeah.
listening, and we'll be back in a couple weeks.